Hello everyone and welcome back to another video where today I want to talk a little bit about a brand new report from everyone's least favourite tabloid, The Sun, that suggests that David Tennant and Billie Piper could be reuniting for a one-off special to mark the show's 20th anniversary following the shock regeneration reveal at the end of the reality war. And I want to talk about this because mainly, even if it isn't true, I want to give my thoughts on the concept. I also just got done watching the Doctor Who Unleashed 20 Years of New Who documentary, and I have to say it's fantastic. If you've ever been interested in the history of the show and the history of the revival specifically, it's a really, really nice piece. I could have easily watched another hour of it. It was really, really good stuff. And yeah, we're going to get right into this, but subscribe if you're new, that would be greatly appreciated. We're trying to get to 30,000 subscribers, and we're currently on 28,400. Any support would be greatly appreciated, but let's dive right in. Just like old Time Lords, iconic Doctor Who pair set up to sensationally reunite for huge special after Ncuti Gatwa flop. I mean, look, you don't have to keep mentioning Ncuti Gatwa, but anyway, The Sun revealed last month that Gatwa was leaving the TARDIS. I mean, it wasn't really you, but sure. Doctor Who's most popular pair could be coming back for a final return in the TARDIS. Insiders say Billie Piper's shock return at the end of the latest series was understood to be teeing up a comeback for David Tennant as the Time Lord for a one-off special. A source said, the BBC brought back Doctor Who in 2005 and there is talk about a possible one-off project to celebrate the 20th anniversary. David and Billie were a hugely popular partnership and he brought in a golden age of Doctor Who. With the anniversary of the reboot this year, there have been some ideas floated about, with the thought of maybe bringing back David and Billie together for one last hurrah. When David's Doctor bi-generated in the 60th anniversary special, his half went on to live a normal life in an alternate universe while Ncuti carried on as the Time Lord. I mean, first of all, it wasn't in an alternate universe, but anyway. It wouldn't be beyond the realms of imagination for him to return with Billie as Rose for a one-off special, not only their partnership, but the anniversary of BBC bringing back Doctor Who. David, 54, played the 10th version of the Time Lord for 5 years, until 2010. In a twist, he returned as the 14th Doctor for 3 specials before handing over the role to Ncuti. The Sun revealed last month that Ncuti, 31, was leaving the TARDIS. That was confirmed last Saturday when he surprisingly regenerated into Billie, 42, at the end of the series finale. After the episode, Ncuti said, "I've loved every minute of it, but now it is time to hand over the keys to that beloved box and let someone else take control and enjoy it every bit as much as I have. I'll truly miss it and I'll forever be grateful." Doctor Who's future is still undecided, with the BBC now waiting to see if Disney+, which pumped millions into the show, will renew its deal. Ratings for the sci-fi show staple have plummeted since Tennant left, with overnight peak viewing figures dropping as low as 1.6 million. I mean, I really hate this narrative that, like, Doctor Who didn't survive beyond David Tennant. Matt Smith was hugely popular, and, you know, early Peter Capaldi era was, you know, a big success. Series 8 was massive. Series 11 was massive. Sure, they didn't sustain those levels of popularity, but I hate this idea that the only way that Doctor Who can attract viewers is with David Tennant and people of that coterie, you know, Catherine Tate, Billie Piper, and that kind of thing. I love them all, but I hate the idea that the only way that the show can attract an audience is with those people, because it's just not true. You know, I was a Matt Smith era baby. That was my era of Doctor Who, and I loved it, and loads of people loved it. And the idea that it wasn't a success and that Tennant was the only thing to be successful is just not true. People often forget that it was Matt Smith who broke America. That was the Doctor that really broke America. The 50th anniversary was one of the biggest things the show has ever achieved. So this idea that Tennant was the only person who could make it a success, I just don't, like, buy into the narrative. Yes, he's one of the most successful Doctors ever, that's undeniable, but I hate this whole thing that only he can make it successful. I just don't think it's true. Meanwhile, Whovians are waiting to see if Billie is the new 16th Doctor, or is sidekick Rose again, and that's where it ends. So, not much to really go on in terms of an actual source here, but I wanted to talk about this for a couple of reasons, because obviously, I'm just assuming that this is true. Like, let's just assume that this is true. I think I'd be a lot more on board with this if we hadn't just had the 60th anniversary specials 2 years ago. If this was the first time David was coming back since the 50th, alongside Billie Piper, I think I'd be a lot more keen for it. But the fact that we just had the 60th 2 years ago does make this feel very, very much like they're just parachuting in the old faces in order to kind of boost the numbers. That is just how it feels, that's how it comes across. I will say, however, even though I have had quite a bit to say about the concept of a Billie Piper return, and specifically the framing of her as this person who was at the end of Ncuti Gatwa's regeneration, even if she turns out not to be the 16th Doctor, that will still be the impression that audiences are left with for the foreseeable future. I will say that if it is just a one-off special with Tennant and Piper to celebrate the 20th anniversary and then we go from there with something new, I'm more on board with that than the idea of Billie becoming the Doctor full-time. I think that for me would really be kind of the ultimate sign of there are no other people that can make this work other than that specific group of people that made it work 20 years ago, and I just don't agree with that. Obviously, you could say that Russell T Davies and crew were already a sign of that, and to a certain extent, yes, the belief that they were the only people who could make it work, but I think that even though I like this era, we can't exactly say that it's been, a universally acclaimed era of the show, at least nowhere near comparative to their first go at it. Obviously, people didn't like the first era as well, but broadly speaking, when you look at the two, when you look at critical reception compared between the two, I don't think it's really comparable. So I think that just proves that as much as I love Russell, he's not the only person who could make Doctor Who, and that team are not the only team who can make Doctor Who. And I just kind of think that it's kind of sad that we're at a point where the only way Doctor Who is seen to potentially be successful is to bring back these old faces. If this special ends with a new era kicking off, with a new Doctor, and, maybe even a new showrunner potentially, I think then I would be a lot more confident. I think part of the reason why I just can't be excited for any of this future stuff, any of this Billie Piper stuff, or David coming back with Billie, is because we don't know what the future is beyond that, or even how those episodes will form. Obviously this article is saying it would be a one-off special, but obviously we don't know that yet. It could be a series of specials, it could be a mini-series, it could be a full series, we just don't know. So I think for me that's another thing hindering any form of excitement I would have, is the future of the show being so just up in the air, like no one knows. And it has now been like over a week since obviously the last episode aired, and we haven't heard anything yet as to what the future may hold. And obviously I wasn't expecting them to reveal the future immediately, but I am sort of like concerned that we are just going to be sat here waiting for a future that never arrives. Maybe that's just partly because I'm a Doctor Who fan and we all have collective PTSD over 1989, but I don't know. I will say there is something incredibly ironic in that 20 years of Doctor Who documentary where they're all talking about how Doctor Who survived because of change and surprise and renewal, and then it cuts to Billie Piper talking about her return to Doctor Who, and I just can't help but feel a certain sense of irony there. The stuff I loved about the last era, the Ncuti Gatwa era, was when it was doing new ideas, for better or for worse. Lux, 73 yards, Dot and Bubble, stuff like that was the stuff I really liked in this era, and I think it's just kind of sad that we're already back to where we were. But I've said that before. I've said my piece on that. What I will say is, if this were to happen, which, it's the Sun, so, I trust them about as far as I can, throw them. But what I will say would be interesting is, I guess, obviously, tying up the 14th Doctor stuff. Obviously, he is on Earth, so there is a way you can bring back Tennant. How that would work if Billie Piper is playing another incarnation of the Doctor would be a bit weird. Would the Doctor fancy themselves, like with the Two Masters in Series 10, or would it be more of a thing of Rose has body swapped with the Doctor and she goes to 14 to kind of fix that? I don't know. Maybe. It's a bit of a weird one, and then obviously you bring up the thing of, if it's the 14th Doctor, how does Catherine Tate tie in? Does she tie in? Then you've got her extended family, and it just becomes this whole thing. And I could talk about that for ages. So much is up in the air right now, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think about this. I mean, I will say, I love David Tennant, and I mean, I think if he was asked, he would come back no matter what. And maybe as a one-off special to kind of hold us over, it could work. But I just worry that, like, once that happens, what's the future beyond that? Are we just destined to get, you know, specials with Tennant and crew forever? You know, like, is that all that's left at this stage? I don't know. Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down in the comments below. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.